It's a pleasure and an honor to have Dr. Guenadiy Lazarov today. Actually, I want to tell you to share that Guenadiy is my personal friend, a very good friend of mine. We know each other since 90s. Guenadiy was born in Bulgaria. I studied in Bulgaria long time ago. He received his physics master's in Sofia State University, chemical engineering as well, master's. And then in '95, he moved to the United States, Philadelphia, and he completed his PhD in physics. Long story short, he is a scientist, he's physics, but he's a brilliant musician as well, with specific focus to the accordion. I played the guitar back in the '90s still, so we got together. Guenadiy moved to industry. He worked significant amount of time with Honeywell and Rudolph Technologies, developing lasers and photonics, things that I don't understand because I'm in biology, and different systems. But meantime, his love for the accordion and the music guided him to switch at a certain point. He will tell us the story, to accordion. Actually, I will be honest with you. At this point in the United States, he is considered to be, he might be modest and not say that, the guru of accordions. There are only 2 or 3 people in the United States that they can handle accordions, meaning maintenance, repairs, that they know accordions that well as Guenadiy. But as well, he's a brilliant musician. So without further ado, I present you Dr. Guenadiy Lazarov. He's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Very good. Well, at least thank you for the kind introduction. And, thank you for the invitation. George, thank you for setting me up here with all the technology, which is...
You might check the button.
Now maybe it's better? Oh. I'll tell you a little bit of several things today, and hopefully will give you a message. Actually, I'm pleased that a big part of the audience is actually young people, because what I want to talk to is probably more suited to people who still have lots of choices to make and are brave enough to make them. Because I have to admit that as we grow wiser, there's some inertia that builds up. And sometimes we don't act on our dreams, only to regret. So, is happiness an art or science? And can we stay happy through career changes, life changes, how we keep a positive attitude, and how we enjoy whatever we do? To me, the secret is how we think and what attitude we keep in general. So I studied physics and engineering, and I believe that developing this way of thinking could help a person in any life situation. Yes, I'm going to talk to you about photonic crystals briefly, and it might not be biology related, but it has applications in biology, and there are some biological species that actually inspired the study of photonic crystals, as you'll see. So what is the scientific method? I mean, we all learn it from school. There will be several stages. Of course, we need an idea to come from someplace. It's usually observation of the world around us. Then we see what's done. We form a hypothesis. What is that we want to research and prove? We design an experiment. We collect data. We evaluate the data. If it's a theoretical questions, we might prove our hypothesis, or we might disprove it, and we move on. If it's a practical application, there's a whole new stage which has to do with building a prototype, performance evaluation, eventually implementation. It can go through marketing, sales, and field service. And actually, as engineers, we have to design something. we have to be careful that it is not only just cool and useful, but it could be repaired in the field. Because if for every small problem, the product we design has to go back to the factory, the design was not very good. And we'll talk about it later. So how can I apply this approach in two seemingly different, actually different fields, the field of optics and photonic crystals, as well as musical instruments design. What is a photonic crystal? I mean, if you Google it, you'll find a definition that it is a periodic optical nanostructure that affects the motion of light in a similar way as ionic lattice affects the motion of electrons in solids. In other words, a useful analogy is to think of a photonic crystal as a semiconductor. In the semiconductor, you have a forbidden gap for electrons. There's no electron states allowed there. And in the photonic crystal, you have a forbidden gap for particular electromagnetic wavelengths. You know that atoms can reflect X-ray, for example, if the wavelength of that emission is about twice the lattice constant. Now, when we have a structure that have a lattice constant, which means it's periodic, and that periodicity is of the order of visible light, which is a couple hundred nanometers, then we can have very interesting effects. And photonic crystals do exist in nature, by the way. So talking about observations, what inspired this type of research? You can find opals, gems. The butterfly wing, the colors are not a result of a pigment or a dye, but it's called structural color. The next slide, I'll show you that under microscope, you can see some periodic structure in the wings of the butterfly. As light falls on that periodic structure, a particular wavelength can diffract from that periodic structure, and you see that particular wavelength. So the bright conditions are favorable. In other words, if we reflect the blue light in this particular case, it does not penetrate the wave. So you can think of a photonic crystal as a very cool medium where the refractive index is modulated. So you have areas with high refractive index and areas with low refractive index. So particular wavelengths, electromagnetic wavelengths, will not be allowed to penetrate the crystal. Now imagine how cool it will be, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, if you can tune that crystal. So you have a broad bandwidth, let's say for this example even white light, and as you control your reflective medium, you can get different color beams being selected from the bunch. And this has to do with some cool applications. Now, this is a slide that I borrowed from internet. See the reference here? Cool thing about it is it shows progressively higher magnification. And especially here, you can see the periodic structure. That is responsible for the blue color that we see. How do we synthesize in a lab a photonic crystal? How do we make such, in other words, nature has outsmarted us, but can we try to expand on this and make a photonic crystal that will have so-called photonic band gap, or that forbidden frequency or wavelength, if you wish, range that cannot penetrate it, or if generated inside it, it cannot escape it. This work that I will describe was performed in 2001 in Morristown in the Honeywell research labs in the group of Ray Bogman under the supervision of Anvar Zakirov. Ray and Anvar are both at the University of Texas in Dallas now. I have a lot to thank them. There are four main processes. So first, we need to form that periodic structure, or the backbone of this structure. So we start with preparing a we have a self-assembly of what we call opal template by slow sedimentation of monodispersed silica suspension. Think of glass beads, pretty much the same size. And if under certain controlled condition, they can slowly sediment, forming a nice packed, dense packed, or face-centered cubic glass. So this is a scanning electron microscope photograph of such a structure. Now, in that structure, these beads will just touch each other slightly. There's the next step where we want to form interconnected network topology. In other words, we want to fuse these glass beads together just a little bit so they can form one single medium. And this happens at high temperature. Now, we have to be careful not to overdo this because we don't want to close these little pores between the beads. The next stage is cool, and we need it because we need a substance with high refractive index. In order to have a photonic crystal, we need to have a refractive index that is higher than 2.8 of that structure. So glass is not going to do it. Silicon is perfect because refractive index is 3.45. So we use chemical vapor deposition, low pressure because we want to infiltrate further deep into the sample. And we can fill that space, as you can see the pink area, completely or only partially. We can close the spheres. And finally, which is another very cool step, we can use hydrofluoric acid to dissolve, to remove the initial template that we started with, or what you see here. And we're left with something that you see in the background here, a replica of the initial crystal, of the initial opal, which is called inverse opal. And the inverse opal could actually be a photonic crystal because it satisfies, or could satisfy these conditions of refractive index, and as well as it has high active surface area, therefore many other applications. And I see the time there, and we'll try to catch up, make up for the initial delay. So I'm gonna browse a little quickly through the next slides. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end of the talk. So this shows the glass beads, of course, everything's exaggerated. You see the space in between them. These voids could be tetrahedral or octahedral. And as you fuse the particles together, the distance between the center of the particles will become smaller than the diameter of the particles because they fuse a little bit. Now that ratio of the diameter of the particles and the distance between the centers could be in a very narrow range in order for this whole process to work. So that tells you how difficult it is actually to make this in a controlled way so that it works. So there will be the experimental self of the sedimentation, a quick picture of the opal films. You can see them in visible light and the different colors show different domains. Some electron microscope pictures of different layers, 10 layers, we have 15, etc. And you can see the iridescence from the films, which shows you the periodic structure. As I change the angle, the light will reflect, and you see different colors. Yeah.
Is this done? Can this be done with simulated annealing? That process where you slowly cool something and let the crystals come into their, into that periodic structure? I mean, you call it CBD is what the...
That's exactly what we do for the initial template. The slow controlled sedimentation allows those silica beads to actually pack in that face-centered cubic glass. That's exactly the way we do it. The sintering or the thermal annealing of the sample is important because when we want to remove the initial template, we want to have access to all these beads as a complete matrix. And this is really the final sample of the first opal. So what you see here is the white stuff is shells of silicon that was infiltrated through the chemical vapor deposition. And you can see relatively thick shells here, about 30 nanometers. or very thin, like onion shells almost. We call this silicon nanofoam or aerogel. It's extremely high surface area, very light. Now, the next two pictures will show you the two crystallographic planes, the 111 and 100, that will give you the hexagonal and the square backing. And the two areas here, the area A, these are voids where the silicon beads used to be before we dissolved them with hydrochloric acid. And the B space is the space that is left since we didn't fill it all with silicon. I already talked about why we like silicon for this application. Okay, now following our scientific method, we have the hypothesis, we design an experiment, and we have a sample. Now let's collect some data. And using 500 nanometers beads diameter and measuring the reflectance, we do see a nice peak around 1 micron. When we use different size, 640, we see how that peak, the reflectance peak will shift from 1 micron to 1.1 micron. Now, why are we interested in that area? Well, infrared photonic crystals could eventually find applications in optical communication. So these are from the thin shell inverse opals, from that sample. The next reflectance plot is from the thick shell. And you see something that is very interesting. The peak here is at about 1330 nanometers, or about 1.3 microns, which is right where we want it to be for datacom applications. So you can, I mean, there's a US patent granted for optical demultiplexer based on such structures. What is this device and why do we need it? Well, when we want to encode information so we can transfer it through, let's say, an optical fiber, we have a bundle of optical fibers going under the ocean, and there's limited bandwidth. So the way we encode information, we would select what's called carrier frequencies, or particular wavelengths, and through different type of modulation, we're going to encode different signals. And then we want to merge them together. So think of different colors, for example. Every color will carry certain information, even though in the infrared you will not actually see these colors. But they are narrow bands from that wide spectrum. So every color carries some information. Then we merge the colors together. We go, let's say, to India, and we need to separate these colors in order to separate the communication, so we can see different TV channels or phone conversations, so we can actually transfer more information. Well, since that photonic bandgap is very narrow, it allows us to use narrow parts of that initial bandwidth. Let's say we start with something that is broad, and we want to separate in separate bands, and every band will carry different information. Now it's time to think about the cool feature that I mentioned, the tunability of that photonic crystal. By changing the lattice constant or the fill factor, you can actually shift the position of that bandgap, and therefore reflecting different parts of that original bandwidth. And you can separate the information that everything's mumbo jumbo, but at the end, you can actually decode the information independently. Now, we can go further. We can do multiple stages. We can form interpenetrating metal meshes. We can form high luminosity light emitting diodes. By the way, prototype exists in the lab. And before I move on, I'll tell you that the dream here, and it's still a dream, is that building on that analogy between the semiconductors and the photonic crystals, we hope that somewhere in the future we'll be able to have a complete optical photonic circuit. So maybe we can build quantum computers this way. I mean, imagine how much faster light moves than electrons. There's no heating problems. It'll be a beautiful world when eventually we see this in real life.
You know, is it expensive? I mean, obviously it is at this point. Since we don't see the
Well, right now
applications-
it's expensive in terms of resources because last I checked, the challenge still is to build such photonic crystals in a controlled way in a relatively large scale. As you notice, the parameters are very strict, so it's not really easy to do that. The price will come eventually down much later. If I refer you to one of my previous slides, when we eventually reach implementation, we can scale up production and then optimize these parameters like cost, time to market, and quality. I think it's the state of the art in this area is still far from commercial applications, but this does not prevent scientists to keep and improve. Yeah.
How about TV screens, like LED, LCD, any application? with
That was one of the applications that was pursued because by tuning the band gap, you can actually reflect different part of the initial bandwidth. So the answer is yes, but I have not seen yet a working display based on photonic crystals. Welcome to my world of music and harmony. And harmony is everywhere. We talked about wavelengths. There's resonance phenomena all around us. And I like music. It was my hobby, and before I knew it, it became my world now. How does one make such a drastic change? Well, before even you make that change, I can tell you how I went through this process. You might find yourself in a crossroads someday. Hopefully, a little bit of this might help you. So I asked myself questions. So at some point I faced a big move out of state. And due to family reasons, I did not think that was probably the best move at that time. So I thought about alternatives. And I asked a series of questions. Do I have a product or service to sell? Can I contribute to improving this product or service that I will offer? Is there a demand for my services? Do I know my customers? Who are they? Do I understand the challenges and the rewards of that new type of work and life that I'm embarking on? And right here, I could just list a few. I mean, it just happens that in the industry that I work with, there are some business cycles. There's some periods where people buy many accordions. There are some other months where they repair their accordions. So there's some uncertainty, and it takes time to build confidence that this actually over time, it's just a cyclicality of the market and it works. Now on the good side, when you are self-employed, you can be very efficient. There's a big if you're self-disciplined in managing your time and resources. Now the concept of product path is much simpler at that level of a small business. And by the way, I put this in quotation marks because there's nothing small about small business if you are the business, because it's your world. I mean, you're one-man band, using terms, because you deal with design, service, marketing, sales, accounting, shipping and receiving, packing. You're the janitor and you are the boss. So that could be nice as you change from one thing to another, but again, talk about self-discipline. One of the best parts of my current life is the social interactions with my customers. It's priceless. You see people of all kind of background, different age, different careers, and they all like music, and it is very rewarding. They like different music, so they like different type of sound. Can I make a living following my passion? That's very important. Is this financially possible within that business model? Well, what is the product or service that I sell? I repaired accordions because I learned how to do this out of curiosity. And I figured that I actually liked it. And I found the best experts that I can apprentice with. And the more I learned about it, the more fascinating it became. So yes, I had work to sell. Can I improve it? As I service different accordions, I noticed that certain features of the instrument contributed to a different flavor of sound, which certain group of musicians liked. So yes, I thought I could improve it. Now, do I know my audience? Very briefly, something that was interesting to me in end of 2007, when I made that move, I looked at the demographics spectrum, if you wish, of our society. And turns out that it was projected during the next 15, 20 years, we would have 10,000, I'll repeat that, 10,000 people per day reaching retirement age. So think the baby boomer generation. When many of these people grew up, when they were kids, the accordion was very popular. In the 40s, 50s, and even early 60s, the accordion was the third most popular instrument after the violin and the piano. So then these people went about their lives, careers, family, maybe switched instruments. But as they approach retirement or retired, they remember their old accordion, comes out of the closet. They get support from family and friends, and they actually enjoy it. Music's beautiful, it makes your life better. So, and these were my customers even before I started doing this full time. They would come to me to repair their accordions that they pull out of the closets. So yeah, it looked like this might actually work. Fast forwarding more than 10 years later, I still enjoy what I do. What is it that I do? I apply that same scientific method that I learned in school, that I used in the university and in my corporate career. And the observation, well, different accordions sound different. And different people like different accordions. That's the beauty. There's no one ultimate accordion that will be good for everybody. Now, with all the years of experience that I had repairing, storing accordions, looking what's inside, I knew the state of the art of that particular field. Now, my hypothesis is that the selection of the woods and the reeds inside, you'll see what the reeds are, affects the tone of the instrument. And if we understand the effect of accordion construction on its tonal character, we could custom build an accordion for particular musical repertoire, for a particular musician, if you wish. Now, once I decided which parameters I'm going to study, I can design an experiment, how to change them one parameter at a time. I mean, in the accordion that you see here, there's a few thousand parts. Only the reeds are more than 400, which are these metal plates that produce the sound. Now, here I can use the fact that as a sole proprietor, if I find a partner, an accordion manufacturer, I could actually be pretty flexible, and we can together test this hypothesis by building not one, but many prototypes using different combinations of these parameters. And then the performance evaluation will be that at the factory, I'll be playing these different instruments side by side. Most importantly, I'll get feedback from my customers. Now, since it's a product here, I'll have to think about the implementation. And since we have cost, time to market, and quality, you can never optimize more than 2 of these parameters. I'm not going to give you many examples, but this is actually quite impressive. If you want to make something real fast, then it'll be either expensive or not very good. So in this particular case, we want to keep the cost in check, and we want to deliver the best quality. So sometimes it takes a little longer to release a new model of accordion, but when we do, musicians love it. Now, working with a small manufacturer posed other challenges, which was achieving brand recognition. And then you realize that there is a high cost of keeping your integrity and not making compromises with quality. Even there might be a customer willing to give you a deposit. You don't promise anything before you make sure it's ready. It does not always work like that in real life. But in some cases, you can afford actually to wait a little more and deliver a good product. And as I mentioned, I perform that warranty maintenance. Accordions are made in Italy. I service them here. So it's important how we design them to begin. picture of that accordion. That instrument was built by a company called Galicia in the Czech Republic. It has this plastic enclosure, which is not good for actual performance because it does not have good acoustic properties, but the accordion was built to show the internal components. So it's very cool. They present it every year at Music Mass, the largest musical instrument stage show in Germany. Always there's many people looking. So you see here wooden reed blocks, and these metal plates are the accordion reeds. There is the bass machine, all these little buttons, there's the keyboard. And there's one important feature that you don't see here, but you'll see on this cross-section here. It's called a tone chamber. A tone chamber is an internal resonator that not all accordions have. I happen to like its effect. It makes the sound from very bright to kind of mellow and warm. And I will demonstrate this on that accordion because it has reeds that are outside of the chamber and inside. So this area right here is the tone chamber. Okay. So the keys have valves. These are the valves to the out of the chamber reeds. This is the valve that goes to the chamber reeds. These two wooden reed blocks, you see them in cross-section, are said to be placed inside tone chamber because the air that goes to activate them goes actually through the chamber. And these are outside of the chamber. Now, this will be the resonator, the wooden shell in which the accordion sits. And these are the reed blocks. This right here is the tone chamber cover, which happens to be important. Now, this is an accordion reed. This is how much you get out of it. It's one of the best ones. This is the effect of the wood. So you hear all these atoms here contributing, vibrating. That's the ensemble. So that's why it's so important to select the right wood. It's important for guitars, for violins, for accordions also. Denser woods, that was part of my hypothesis. Denser woods, they'll have different type of vibrations. They'll have lower pitch harmonics. If we use metal as a cover of that tone chamber, we can have a, kind of a brassy sounding instrument. It'll have harmonics in the medium frequency range. There are some pictures of reeds here and reed valves. So
this produces the sound.
yes. So this is a single reed. That picture has like 5 of them, 4 more, and 4 more. This is the leather valve. The valve could be artificial material, mylar in this particular case. Both type of valves would have their effect, which I'm not going to go deep inside. But the reeds themselves, they're made of steel, and that steel can have different composition, different carbon content, different metallurgic circuit. So the geometry of the reed and the texture, how the reed is voiced, in other words, how there's just a tiny gap. If you look against the light, you can almost not see that little air between the vibrating reed plate and the slot in the frame. So this all contributes to the sound of the accordion. Now this is inside the keyboard part. This is the tone chamber, and it's made in solid mahogany in this case. The body of the accordion is also made of mahogany. The reed blocks of this particular, this is a C. Van Figli accordion. C. Van Figli is the company that makes these accordions, and Ivan Staloilovich owns this company, and he's very enthusiastic about accordions. And it was like when I met him, there was this instant click that we knew we were on a mission together to actually recover the lost knowledge of making a fine accordion. Now, when there's a demand for a product, there's a lot of resources, and you can keep experimenting. And then, as the accordion fell out of popularity, manufacturers struggled. They had to actually think about cost and surviving. So there was a period of time where accordions were not considered of the same quality. Now we have a renaissance because we can see renewed interest. You can see young people getting exposed to the accordion because they see grandma or grandpa playing the accordion at home It's not like the musician is on a pedestal on a stage. They can go, kids can touch buttons and see the effect. They get excited about it. So we are happy to be able actually to invest into studying these parameters and making different types of sound. Two examples here, one with a wooden tone chamber and one with a metal tone chamber. Very different sound. This will be warmer sounding accordion. People who play jazz might prefer that accordion. This will have more of a contemporary sound. If you play classical music, maybe with strings ensemble, you might like this sound. So the prototypes in this particular case, we built 26 different accordions. We changed 3 different types of reeds that have different geometry, different structure. Every reed maker will not disclose how they make their own reeds because they have a particular tone. So 6 combinations here. Then we tried 6 different types of geometry of the body of the instrument. So these are different models of accordions, different sizes of the resonators. And then we used different woods like mahogany, maple, walnut, a combination of woods for the body of the accordion. That instrument that you see here is made of, by now, about 50 years old walnut. And it's a unique piece. So we had these accordions. It was so much fun to play them, to watch musicians' faces, see their smiles, and listen to their comments. So we knew we were on the right track. And now I think that we've actually proved our hypothesis that we know how to achieve a particular tonal color combining these parameters, the wood selections, the reeds, the geometry of the instrument. And if a musician comes and asks for an accordion for polka music, we can make an accordion that will give him the sound he remembers from childhood, or the sound his audience craves. Or if somebody likes to play classical music, we can build the accordion so they would love it.
Can I interrupt you? I have a very simple question. Was it a coincidence that you collaborated with the Italian company? Did you look in the US market? Do we make accordions in the US? I have no clue.
Very interesting question. The accordion capital of the world is Castelfidardo,
Italy.
in Ancona, in Italy. So most of the high-quality accordions now come from Italy. There's a factory in the Czech Republic. Russia has an accordion factory in Tula. Accordions are produced in China, in South Korea. The Germans have a very good factory. They produce brands like Honor, Weltmeister, etc. But most of the accordions that are popular in the United States are Italian accordions. Accordions were built in the United States in the 40s and 50s, and then as the cost of labor went up, factories were moved back to Italy. They were started here by Italian immigrants, and in the late 50s, pretty much all of them moved back to Italy. So when I looked at what possibilities I had, pretty much the choice was in Italy. And the interesting thing is that I liked these accordions first as a musician. I wanted to own one, and then the idea came, hey, we can do probably more together. So then I partnered with them, became their representative, and it's been a very interesting collaboration. So C1TV accordions, and you're going to hear one of them. And in terms of performance evaluation, I invite you to help me actually evaluating the sound of that accordion as I demonstrate it for you. My message to you: study science, engineering. You might love music and reading and art, it's great. But I still think that studying science gives us a unique approach to life. It does not interfere with our emotional being. It just enhances it. There's a synergy there. Find the best mentor you can in your area of interest. Now, these people that I mentioned, like Ray, Anvar, Ivan Stanoilovich, my thesis advisor, Marietta Lira, many people changed my life. Without such people in your life, yes, you can be a self-achiever, but I have kids, and I see sometimes we as parents can try to teach them our own life experiences, but other people can be more efficient because there's no bias. So do search for those mentors. whatever you do. It could be a professor, it could be a colleague at work later on, it could be a role model. Approach them, find them. Most of these people are actually quite humble and they will help you ask the questions. Keep a positive attitude. Hey, life is good. And just, there's no other way how to say that. Be honest with yourself about what makes you happy. This is the difficult part. Not all the time we're ready to make a change, but you will know when the time is right. You don't have to make a change. You might be happy with whatever you do. Follow your passion. I mean, if you make the right choice of what you work, you don't work a single day in your life. Manage expectations. That's also very important. I mean, if I hope to become rich by selling many accordions and in 5 years retire, obviously I'm going to be disappointed because I did my homework, I know my market, it's sustainable, I can enjoy meeting different customers and different people. But designing and selling accordions is not going to let you retire in 5 years. Play some music or listen to some music. Thank you all, and let's listen to some music. I'll stay at the end if you have questions. I'll answer them, but I'm watching the time. I know Elias has a class to teach. So let's play some music, and then I can be here for questions. And I'll change my hats now, going from one life to another. I'll turn off the microphone. I hope you can hear me. So this way we're not going to deal with feedback issues. So here's one of these very special Steven Figli accordions that came out of this type of exploration. Now, this is reed outside of the tone chamber. This is the same reed in the tone chamber. And you can hear an audible difference, and for different music style, it could be desired one sound or the other. Another very interesting instrument that is a result of science and technology meeting art. And Elias can tell you why it's so special. I talked about woods here. He has different materials in these instruments.
This this is made in USA, this guitar. Fortunately, because of cost issues and other, they have ceased making them. It's a composite guitar. It's not the traditional materials. The top is carbon graphite, and the back, the ball is made by fiberglass. It resonates great. Of course, it has wooden parts. It's very resilient because this is more rigid, more stable at different temperatures, humidity, so it does not suffer the typical wood guitar problems that wood guitars have. On the other hand, one would say that it might not have the fine rings and bells that the organic material, the wood, produces. It's a matter of taste.
Different people for different repertoire might like one or the other. By the way, there was an effort to make accordion from carbon fiber. It did not work.
If you have any questions for Guenadiy at this point, please, the students, or if you have any additional questions. I have time does not allow to continue, I want to present Guenadiy. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
No words. On behalf of the STEM department, we have a certificate of appreciation for you, signed by the dean and myself. Also, very importantly, financial part honorarium. I'm not going to disclose how much money. And
going to that last point, is it feasible? We
in that business model to make a living.